Hello everybody, Dark Skeleton here, and in this video we're going to be doing basically a commentary on a game I was playing of Town of Salem that I was using an app I came up with, Fake Log Generator, in order to win. So, in order to win Town of Salem, when you're playing the bad guy, often you need to lie about your role, especially when you're talking to the jailer and, you get jailed that night and they're like, oh, post your role or I'm gonna lynch you. So, sometimes, especially if you're not trying extremely hard with the game, you might not have the right fake information to give them at any moment. But using the fake log generator, anytime anybody asks you for your role or for proof, quote-unquote proof, of your role, you can go ahead and use the fake log generator and just generate whatever you want on the fly. And in this specific match at Town of Salem, it ended up being pretty useful. It's a lot better when I found it's a lot better when you're actually playing as a bad guy like a SK or the Mafia, since they were trying to hide their roles, but the town really does want other people to know their roles. Could also work for Executioner or that kind of thing. So in this game of Town of Salem, I was playing the Godfather, and I decided I would pose myself as the Investigator. As you can see, for some reason, the mayor, Titote, decided to reveal himself here, and I didn't immediately lynch him, which was the only real mistake I made this game. We still won pretty hard despite that. So as you can see on the fake log generator, there's a couple different options. You can basically choose any role you want if you happen to be playing a ranked game, and it reduces the roles if you're playing classic. And that's just so that when you do generate the roles, it makes a little bit more sense when you actually post it in the log. So what I like to do is copy and paste the log straight from the generator into the basically the death log inside of Town of Salem, mostly just to have it there so that whenever people ask for it, I can give it to them. Since you can copy and paste from your log, I think it's a fine place to put it. Even if you are, say, the Mafia, if you post a fake log in your death note, it doesn't really matter because if you died, they already figured out that you were faking it anyway. So as the game progresses here, what you're going to see is that I really push myself hard as the Investigator. I think one of the ways to actually win Town of Salem, one of the better ways, is to be very proactive in whatever arguments you're trying to make. If you sit back and play in the background, eventually, like, the investigative roles will figure you out if you happen to be playing the Mafia. And if you're playing the town, you still want to be proactive because basically, especially if you're an investigative role, the more you try to say, oh, okay, this guy's a bad guy, as long as you're actually doing the math and figuring it out, usually people will just kind of follow you along. A lot of people who play Town of Salem, sadly, basically play like they're sheep. So it's up to you to lead them all to either their doom or victory, regardless of what role you're playing. So we already have a pretty good start. The serial killer actually being dead is kind of good and bad, probably more bad than good for the Mafia at this point, simply because the serial killer is going to randomly kill people, and more than likely that's going to be a townie who dies. So we have to basically do a lot of, in the middle of the game, lynching and night executions in order to pull this off. As you can see, I'm Jack Axe is my alias in this game, just posting the investigator's log. A note that I only post the nights that actually go up to the point. You can generate for as many days as you want, essentially, but you don't want to post more days than have actually occurred, for obvious reasons. So maybe a little bit on the silly side, I asked Winters for his role. I didn't even realize that he was another one of the Mafia. Kind of funny. But yeah, just kind of pushing that investigative playstyle, just calling people out saying, oh, I'm the investigator and I think that you are the whatever, and calling out for that, trying to get them executed, is actually a good strategy because you fake being the investigator, everybody listens to you, you get them executed, and then you get to kill another person in the middle of the night, and before they know it, the town doesn't have enough people to actually stop the Mafia. Here, obvious vote to vote yes for Swiggity Swooty or whatever his name is, simply because if you're playing Mafia, it's usually a good idea to vote other people to their graves, because the less people you have to contend with, the easier it is to win as the Mafia. So, obvious vote. Only downside is if they were a jester, but I think most people there were pretty confident that he wasn't. just a quick little funny bit right here. Winters called out for killing me because I was calling out for killing him during the day. And yeah, I just remembered that he was a Mafia as well. So now that that's cleared up, we can actually work as a team for the rest of the game. Jumping ahead, I post the Investigator's log once a night, just using whatever was randomly generated from the fake log generator. Winters LOL at me simply because I was trying to get him executed the previous night. But yeah, pushing that Investigator's role, even if it's fake, not a lot of people will really check whatever you are posting in a log. And I think with the most effective time a fake log generator is going to work is for the jailer. Because the jailer is more looking just to see if you can prove it immediately, not necessarily going to look through all your information. So if you say you're the investigator in your log, I would figure 7 or 8 times out of 10 that they'd believe you as long as it's somewhat believable. So I actually call out for Rip Racked to basically be executed by having in my log, oh, well, 10 was the Godfather, 10 happens to be Rip Racked, so he's going to get voted Godfather. Just copy and pasting more information into the actual in-game death note so that I can use it. And as you'll see here, for the fate of Rip Racked, basically, because I said, hey, let's execute him, I'm the investigator, which means that I'm basically God and whatever I say is true, he's, yeah, totally gonna get hung. And there he goes. So faking as the investigator usually works pretty well, I find. It's a really good role to fake. Sheriff might also work, but I think with the sheriff, if you say that someone was like Mafia and then it turns out that they weren't, it's a little bit more incriminating for you as the faker. But with the fake log generator, I did all 33 roles, so really if you want to fake as anything, it's technically possible. I did as good of a job making up what someone might say if they were to make a log. So here's the following day, and as per normal, one person dies because the serial killer was no longer in the game. Continuing to push the investigative BS, and I just post the night updated with one more day. You wouldn't necessarily have to use the generator for each night. You could just do like 8 nights initially and then just copy and paste the number of nights that it's been up to this point from your log. And that works pretty effectively. So I actually did forget what Nice Guy's role was here in this case, asking for it. People remind me it was the jailer, so, you know, being off here, going to take the jailer out and going to try to vote for anybody else. You can see that Coco has actually kind of caught on to the fact that I'm lying about everything, but the thing is, it doesn't really matter. Once you've tricked people for like 3 days, you've basically done enough damage that you can win. So they're like, wait, you know, there couldn't possibly be a situation where Coco's, or number 10 showed up as Amnesiac and the Godfather. What's your story, Jack? And then my story is basically, I don't care, whatever. You can keep saying very valid things, but I'm just going to ignore them for the most part because we've already taken out all of your allies. You got the bodyguard, the spy, the escort, the vigilante, now Nice Guy again. It says Winters because we actually had a consigliere, or whatever they're called, the person who switches people around. And at this point, yeah, the Coco might be a little bit smarter than the rest of the town, but he's running out of friends, and it doesn't really matter too much. Obvious thing to point out, a fake log that was generated randomly is never going to be as good as one that you physically came up with. The goal of the fake log generator app is to basically have something immediately available. So either for lazy people or for people who are being asked a question on the spot, like when a jailer puts you in jail and you need something immediately and you hadn't typed anything up. That's a situation where the fake log generator is really useful. These last few townies have actually kind of caught onto the game that's going on, but as you can see, it's still too late. Nax, obviously a completely innocent person, we're going to vote him guilty, and that just knocks another person off of the townies list. I believe it's the next night where I die, and the only reason I actually die is because I didn't take the mayor out at the beginning of the game. Totote counts as 3 votes, otherwise we would have had a perfect game, so that's my own bad there. The funny thing is that, like, Nax right there and the Coco, what they are saying completely is logical, but most people who seem to play this game as average players really are easy to influence. If you say something that sounds kind of true, they'll just accept it as true and they'll vote someone guilty. So it's not even necessarily about how accurate the information you're giving is to a point. It's more about how influential you can become by posing as someone who should be trusted or who should be really valuable to the team. And how you do that, or at least how I try to do that, is by taking charge of the game, being very vocal, making arguments even if they're completely BS. And posting a fake log is actually a really good way to trick people into believing what you're saying is true, because, I mean, there really isn't a fake log generator out there other than the one I've just created, so no one's used to this kind of thing, which means in most cases people will just kind of assume that if you put the effort into creating something like that, like a fake log that actually has 6 nights, that what you're saying must be true, and so they won't even bother to read through it. But right here I finally pay the price for not voting the mayor out. That was my own fault. But if you do the math on this, there's 3 Mafia, I'm about to die, the last 2 Mafia versus 2 Townies, and none of the Townies are a vigilante or anything like that, so 1 Townie's going to get executed, and then it's 2-on-1, so basically we've won at this point, even with the mistakes I've made. Because I was so vocal and faking so much as being the investigator, I was able to BS my way to a victory for the Mafia team. So thank you for watching. I've been Dark Skeleton. I will be putting a link to the Android and Windows version of my app Fake Log Generator for Town of Salem in the description. It's compatible with Windows 8 Phone, Windows 8 in general, Windows 10, and Android. Currently it's going to be going for $1 on each of the platforms, and if you do happen to pick it up, I hope that you have some nice games with it as I just experienced, and you can put it to good use. As always, feedback is welcome, and I do plan on improving the app as the game continues to grow and evolve, since it's one that I like to play personally. So, thank you once again, and I'll see you in my future videos.